everybody. Welcome to this episode of Backstage. This is the Advanced Podcast, and we are talking about how words matter today. So I was thinking I would bring in my two friends, laser extraordinaire, Kyle Cole.
So true.
And unlicensed therapist, Lindsay Knuckles.
Oh, that's awesome.
How are y'all doing today?
We're glad to be here. We're doing great.
Yeah.
Oh, well, are you doing great?
I'm feeling very great. the laser lead in.
Yeah.
So true, which
Yeah.
is the nice part about it. Yeah.
Well, we're talking about how words matter today, and I thought you two would be excellent to come in and talk about this because
Awesome. Thank
we
you.
have had some shared experiences around this. So, what we all have it. So it's time to be vulnerable. It's time to get real. There has to have been a time in your life at some point when you said something and you immediately regretted it. Like the second the words left your mouth, you were like, I wish I hadn't said that. So who's got a story? Somebody's got a story.
Well, I don't have a story about me personally that comes to mind immediately, but I have a story that I was there and was involved in, and I kind of wish I had spoken up to kind of help the situation.
Okay.
So a friend of mine invited her over to spend some time at a holiday with my aunt and uncle.
Okay.
So I'm there. My whole family's there. My aunt and uncle is there. A little backstory. My uncle is 15 years older than my aunt. They're married, have 3 kids. So,
Okay.
Okay. So we're watching TV. Go ahead.
Is this like when you're a teenager that this story's taking place?
This is no pretty recent. Yes, yes.
Okay.
This is a pretty recent story within the past year. Yeah. So pretty recent.
okay.
Yeah. So
All
we're
right.
set the scene. It's recent. So we're watching like a football game, I think, and we start like talking about the commentator, like, oh yeah, what's is he married? What's this? You're kind of Googling him and you're
Yeah.
trying to kind of figure out his life. That's what we do. So pull it up and we're like, oh, he's got a wife that's 15 years younger than him. And so everybody, my family knows, but my friend does not know the context that's in the room.
And we can acknowledge it's not unheard of, but it is unusual.
Sure.
Unusual.
Let's acknowledge it.
Not unheard of.
Be
for
free.
sure.
Let's acknowledge it.
Yep.
So we're all like, cool. But my friend thinks it's very unusual. And so she's like, oh my gosh, like, who would do that? That's just, who would do? And the room is just very silent and still.
Aunt and uncle sitting at the
Aunt
table?
and uncle are sitting. We're in the living room. This is setting. We're in the living room. And it is like you could cut the tension like a steak knife, butter knife, any kind of knife. And I don't know really what to do because everyone's kind of frozen. And I'm like, I would. I would marry someone 15 years older.
You're trying to help?
I'm trying to help, but I end up making it worse. And she's like, that's disgusting. Oh, my goodness. Over and over again. Who would do this? And finally, my aunt was like, I did. And everyone was like, like the air was like sucked out of the room. So that was the point where I'm like, I like, what should I have said? But immediately I'm like, my friend, sorry, I kind of left you out there.
Did you guys just pack it up and get out of
Yeah,
there?
like, we'll leave. Thanks so much for
See you
having
later.
us.
Have
Food was
Thanksgiving.
good. Food was great. Thanks for
Yeah.
having us. Hopefully
So-
we left our mark.
Yeah, we did.
She's never coming back. I'm actually going to leave. Can you grab an Uber home, please?
I don't know her. I don't know how she got here.
Right.
Who brought her?
Yeah.
So good. So I've had this lifelong battle of trying to decide how to get in this funny circle, right?
Okay.
And so my dad and grandpa, they were like always telling jokes. Like it's like they thought of jokes before they were gonna see each other. So it was just like they always had a
Always
joke
ready.
ready.
I can identify.
They stayed ready. They stayed woke. So I'm at this weird age of like determining how do I get into that inner circle. That's
Right.
where I want to be.
You like
I don't
that
want to be at the kids' table.
Borderline, you're not quite one of the bros, one of the boys
I'm
yet,
not-
but you're
I'm
like,
not
I need
there
to
yet.
break in.
I'm like, and so like I was thinking, I knew Thanksgiving time. I think it was Thanksgiving. It was a family dinner, so this was probably Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And so I'd been thinking and preparing this joke, and
I don't like where this is going
Yeah.
for you.
no, right? Grandpa's straight across. He's a pastor. That's important for later on in this story.
I don't like that that's important.
He's a pastor. My dad and my mom, my brother and my sister are all along the left side. I remember this in my mind like perfectly. On the other side is
Where
grandma.
we're sitting.
She's sitting by grandpa. And then other family members, lots of other family members.
Okay.
And so the time comes like 2 seconds in the meal. I can't wait any longer. I think that's the right moment, right? So we're 2 seconds in, just said the prayer. And
At this time, are you because I think I have an idea of where this is going. Are you on the fence as to whether or not this is a good idea? Or are
I'm
you
in-
like, I'm about to make my mark?
I was about to make the mark. Dude, like, I had thought this through well, I thought.
Okay.
In my head, I'm like, this is the moment. The family's going to be there. I'm going to make my mark. I'm going to enter that circle of humor. And so the time comes, we just start eating, and I say this joke out loud in front of everyone. And immediately, when I see the reactions on people's faces, I'm like, I do not understand that joke. that joke is understood in a different way from everybody else. And so I look at my grandpa.
I gather from the sense that you haven't already told us the joke that maybe it's not totally appropriate.
It was just vulgar. And I had no idea, though. I just didn't know. It was like one of those, I didn't quite understand the verbiage, but I thought I did. And I looked at my grandpa.
That's so rough.
And I look at Grandpa, and Grandpa looks at me. And Grandpa looks at my father, and my father looks at me. And it is just like the lowest moment in my joke-telling life. And I felt no bigger than a breadcrumb. It was just like, and I don't even remember the repercussions, but I'm pretty sure my dad just decided in that moment, I need to say nothing. Like, he feels this moment. There's nothing, we don't need to have a conversation. And yeah. Can I share one more?
Yeah,
Because
I would love for you to.
this is one that I think just people need to hear, and I'm going to offer some advice at the end of this one because I think it's just very relevant in our life. So, but my aunt comes in the door, and my aunt is just a bigger gal, okay? And she came in, and I did the thing. Probably you know where this is going, but I said, "Oh, Aunt, whatever your name is, you're pregnant. That's super great and super exciting." And you remember that look I was talking about that my grandpa gave me?
Yeah.
I looked at my mom, who this is her sister, getting a very similar look from her. And like in that moment, that was another moment where I just felt so small. I feel like a lot of people have this story of like,
Right.
it's something you only do once. So I've learned from that mistake, and I want to offer some advice to anyone that might be listening other than you two today. And that is, there's another way about doing it. Right. And I don't care if
There's always
woman
another way.
I don't care if a woman looks like she's 87 weeks pregnant.
Yeah.
It is not okay to ask a woman.
Even if she's in the
she is
delivery
pregnant.
room.
She's given birth.
Yeah, it's not okay. A better question might have been, are you expecting some life changes? Like, what's going on? What's going on in your life? Like, is there anything new going on? And let
I
her
like that
lead
one.
in.
I like
and
that
let
one.
her lead in. And if she says, actually, we're gonna have a baby, no way! You're gonna have a baby? I couldn't tell. You turned sideways. I couldn't see you. So yeah, just words of advice. Words of advice from young Kyle.
That's
So,
good. That's good.
yeah,
That's a
that
good
was
word.
rough.
Because
That was
you're
rough.
trying to celebrate, but you actually end up offending. You
Right.
know, it's
Yeah.
such a deep. It's a
One of the rules I heard, I think I read about this online in just some random forum. They were like, the best piece of advice I've ever received was don't comment on anything that somebody can't change in 5 minutes. And pregnancy
Interesting.
is one of those things, or I mean, weight in general.
Sure. Yeah.
So you just let them bring it up.
Yeah, naturally.
Yeah.
Naturally.
That's good. That's
So.
good. That's a good word.
Yeah, that's good.
Man.
Naturally.
That's we could probably cut it right there. We could just
Yeah.
end this,
right.
Or
it
just
up,
keep
like-
talking about
That's
things
good.
you
Don't be
regret.
like
I
us.
said it'd be longer, so
Yeah.
that's great.
Don't be like us.
Well, I mean, everybody screws up. Everybody's had the experience of being the person who said something. But on a slightly more real, more serious note, have you ever had a time where somebody said something and probably immediately forgot about it, but those words stuck with you long after that conversation, and it was probably like irrelevant to the other person, but it stayed with you for days, months, years, even?
I was in college, and I went to a Christian school, a small Christian school, and you had to graduate. Like, in order to graduate, you had to either do this like week-long camping excursion, which I did not do, or you could do this like half a semester team building course. I chose that one, and so it was like walk on this beam blindfolded, and you can't talk, and you have to get to the other side. All your teammates, like we did those kind of games. So I was in a class. I'm a junior in college, and they're all seniors in the class. And so I get to the end of the semester, and I remember my teacher, her name was Tara, And we did this like words thing at the end. I like barely remember the context, but I remember what she said to me. And I think we like spoke to each person in the group. But I remember she looked right at me and she was like, "You're a leader." And she called me a leader. And that was the first time that someone had ever called me that. And I remember being like maybe caught off guard by that. I'm like, wow, I never considered that. And she kind of spoke into like the influence I had, and that when I said things, people listened and people followed. And I never talked to her again. I mean, that was the last class I had with her, last time I really saw her. But that was the first time I think I set the course of like, well, maybe I do have influence and maybe I do have a voice. And so she, I think, helped name what I could be. As that was one. And I had never thought of that before.
What about you, Dr.
Cool. So mine's a little different, but I remember this moment, and it was not even like a big significant moment by any means, but I remember me and my dad were golfing, and something along the lines of like he told me something that he regretted doing as a parent, and it wasn't a big significant thing. It was something like, and I think it was golf related, something about, I wish I'd have paid attention more to the fact that you loved golf, or it was something along that lines this much. And to me, at that time, I was a pretty new dad. I think we had just had our second child. And so, like, I had a daughter who was maybe 3 and a son that was 1. And just, like, that vulnerability to him, like, saying that was really comforting, like, going into, like, having kids. Because there's just feels like there's so high pressure, I guess, like you're raising kids. And so like just him coming back and like, it wasn't a big thing. It wasn't like, I should have taken you to school and not raised you at home in the woods, like it was, it could have been way worse. It was just, but his vulnerability to like just have that adult conversation, but also it was just really peaceful knowing like going into that with my kids and like, there's going to be things like, there's going to be little things that's a bummer you miss out on, but like looking back on that, like my dad didn't miss like a whole lot of big things, and so there was something kind of cool about that. And I almost know for a fact that he wouldn't ever recall having had that with me. So that was an interesting one as we talked about that question. It was just kind of cool.
On the other side, do you have any negative words? I mean, these were both kind of, or all of these stories were pretty positive. Do you have any negative words that somebody said something, and again, probably forgot about it, but then, I find what happens to me is I can shake things off okay at the time, and then the next time I make a mistake, or the next time I'm sitting alone for a few hours, and then like your head just starts to go places, I'm like, they were right. Oh gosh, I am terrible. I am whatever they said. Yeah. Anything coming to mind for either of you?
Yeah, I have one. A little context. I am an emotional person.
Go on.
I am a deep feeler. That's how the Lord made me. I have deep emotions. And so this time in my life, I was probably like out of college, if you will.
Yeah.
I didn't have a great sense of self or a great sense of like, this is how God made me. Don't let your emotions control you. They're great to have, and they're a gift God's given you, but they don't have to control you. And so I was already kind of feeling insecure about myself, about how God made me, about my emotions. There was like some shame there. And so I remember talking to somebody, and they used the word dramatic in a situation with me. And I think it was either like, don't be dramatic, or I don't remember being called dramatic, but it was like, don't be dramatic.
It was used in your direction.
In my direction, a reference. Yeah. And I remember it was like very, like, it caught me off guard, and I was like, I am dramatic. And like, to your point of like, I am. And for years after that, I just heard that in my head. You're being dramatic. You're being dramatic. And so it was the way that the enemy used that, and to be like, every time you show emotion, you're being dramatic. Or anytime you need to like analyze a conversation and think through it, and I take the long approach sometimes in things that you're being dramatic, Lindsay. And so the enemy has like brought that up several times. So that's like a word that I'll always come back to, where I feel like that's where they'll get me, is like, it's the way God has made me, but I'm going to twist it to make you seem dramatic. So that's,
I had the exact same experience, and it was somebody, it kind of like how I talked about, I have to like agonize over decisions.
Yes.
My mind just goes into overdrive all the time. It always runs to like the worst possible, like if one minor bad thing happens, I try to play it out of like, if this keeps going, where's the road?
Yeah.
And I expressed that, and this is one of the first times I was ever like legitimately open and vulnerable with somebody. And then at some point in a conversation, the word dramatic got thrown in there, and even now, I'm like, anytime I feel something and I'm like driving myself insane, I'm like, you're just being dramatic. And there's no point in sharing this with anybody.
Yes.
I think about it all the time. I'm still not over it. So I totally feel what you're saying with that.
Yeah.
No, mine is more of, so this is interesting in that we're talking about words, and something that really has been a hard thing for me is my relationship with words growing up, even from the sense of writing them, speaking them, spelling them. But it's been like one of those things my whole life that it's been like, me and my buddies just kind of poke fun at the fact that I can't spell well. It's
Sure.
hard for me
Yeah.
to write. Just like one of those skills, like in school, that you just struggled with, and it's
Yeah.
been something my whole life. It's just been kind of like this joke, but something that also is like, this is not a joke. Like it causes like anxiety
Yeah,
to like.
it's funny until it's a legitimate
Until-
problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So it's that's one thing. Like I can just remember lots of times like things were said about writing, spelling, things like that were just like, man, just really heavy anxiety and things. Like I had reservations about that I would try to hide, and so I couldn't think of like a specific, but I know there's a long line of that because I'm already nervous about it.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's like it's still fun to joke about, and then it's like when you're alone is the problem?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
I think-
And
is
Yep.
it
Yes.
same?
Oh, yes.
100%. Because I can joke, ha ha ha, I'm dramatic. I'm
Oh my
emotional.
goodness,
And
if
I
you
go
go home,
alone,
yeah.
it's like,
right.
no one loves me. Oh gosh. Like just
And I can't spell love. I can't even
How you spell
the
dramatic?
PHL. Yeah. So like, yes, definitely, it's something like that.
Yeah, it's so thunderous in your head when you're alone.
It
yeah,
is.
it is.
Yeah.
It's like a
It
big
is.
echo chamber.
Yes.
It's just like the words get louder and louder and louder, and then you're just like,
Yeah.
I'm done. Like I
Yes.
just can't. You can't. That's why you have to have people who can like
just- yeah.
even if it's like a not like a physical violence, but like somebody just to
Yeah.
like,
Yep.
hey, like
Yep.
guys, snap, get out of that. You're
Yep.
like we're not there.
Yeah, it's not you.
Well, I find that because this is a fairly new. I say fairly new. It's like a year and a half before since I've heard this those two words. Words matter. It's kind of a new concept that I'm still wrapping my head around because I was always one growing up, and even now I'm half tempted depending on the person. Some people just like write thank you cards and greeting cards and all that stuff. I was always the one that was like, right in the trash can.
I've kept all of mine. I still have them. From like elementary school.
Real-
Sorry.
hashtag
I
real talk?
actually real
Whoa.
talk. Yeah. It's fine. Shoe boxes. I'm not a hoarder. Oh my goodness.
Shoe
What
box-
a crazy
Let me
admission.
clarify, shoe boxes.
Yeah. Of course.
How many
really
are we
large
talking?
pair of shoes.
How many are we
I
talking?
should count them. I don't know. There's a lot. So you're thinking it's doesn't matter to me.
How many?
Birthday cards.
So
Yeah.
we're the opposite.
We're the opposite,
It sounds like because
yeah.
I was usually like, every
I
once
was
in a
raised
while.
to write them.
Oh,
so
yeah,
you're
that
raised to
wasn't
keep them.
That wasn't a thing in my family. Every once in a while, if it's like a very it's like a special event or something, I'll hang on to it. But usually I'm like, it's like the old joke of like, how long is it acceptable for me to keep this until I can throw it away and get this clutter out of my life? It's something I have to be intentional about, and I think it's not something that I struggle with it. Now that I know about it, but I think a lot of people don't necessarily struggle with it. They're just not aware. They just don't think about the fact that that their words can be really, really significant and can change the course of somebody's life, whether for
Preach.
good or for bad. You either build them up or you're sending them down the hill. So, what is something you do personally, like you specifically? What do you do that is intentional with your words? How do you make your words matter? If you were like giving it, like if somebody was like, I've never thought about this before.
Yeah.
What's something I can do? Like, what is your advice there?
I have two things that come to mind when you say that. The first one is I think the mode that you deliver your words is important.
That's a fact.
I think that when you want to say something to someone and the intensity of words mattering is face to face, I think there's a lot of value in that. I have a leader in my life, or a friend, who for years would always tell me there's no tone in text. And he would text me something, and I'd be like getting fired up about it. And he's like, "Did I say that? No, there's no tone in text."
Yeah.
And so I
Like,
think
there's
when
no
we
you read the worst
read
possible
it, yes.
emotion.
Even something positive, I think it's good to text that, but face to face is so much value when you're able to look somebody in the eye
Yeah.
and say you're a leader. and I see this in you, and hey, this is not the most difficult decision you're ever going to have to make.
I mean, I think of it as simple as like, sending somebody, like if I forgot something, I'm like, have you left yet? And then somebody reads it, it's like, have you left yet? Like, come on, we're waiting.
Yes.
That tone.
Yeah, it's so different. Yeah, and so I think we assume, or we'll just automatically assume the worst.
Yeah.
At least that's what I do, And I'm
I
like,
think
they're mad.
everybody
They
does.
walk in, you're like, oh, okay, well,
That's
you
why
know, and-
emojis kind of help, but then
Yes.
like people can be sarcastic with emojis too, and
Yes.
you're like,
Yeah.
I'm confused
Yes.
emotionally.
Yeah, yes,
Right.
yes. So and even the positive side too. I think it's just a lot of value in looking someone in the eye and telling them something good. So that would be one of my words of advice is that when you want to make words matter, say it to someone's face.
Yep.
And then the second thing is you brought it up a little bit ago, but I think that words help change perspective, and words help you see differently, and words have so much power. And I think for me, I'm a words of affirmation person. And so I can believe I've got a pretty loud inner critic, and I've got lies that I'm kind of wrestling with all the time. And so when someone's able to speak words to me, I believe it. And it's God speaking through another person. I believe it. And I think for us, that words have the power to set the course for someone to build them up or to tear them down. And I think we have a choice in that.
Yeah.
So it's a good boundary.
Like there's another thing that I think of, like when I enter a room, I've had to get a lot better at this. Like this is over time, but feeling the conversation and feeling the room before you jump into the conversation, right? Because
Like
when
to
you
tell an inappropriate joke, for example.
for example,
Yes.
not what you want to do. So, but like coming into the room and just realizing that the words that are coming out of your mouth, are they going to benefit the other people in the
Right.
room?
Yeah, that's good.
Instead of just worrying about what I'm about to say, what I need to tell you, really taking what's going on in the room and what is beneficial to them, and actually thinking about it before just jumping into conversations. So it's okay to take time to process before you jump into
Yeah, it's good.
spitting things out.
And then
That's good.
I guess one last thing that comes to mind, and this was a revolutionary thought for me whenever I heard it, was just if you think something nice, say it. Because I think I'm like,
People
oh
wanna
man,
hear that.
he's so cool.
Yes.
Like, oh, she did awesome with that. But I don't consciously say it out loud.
Yes.
I'm just like, oh, they're so talented.
Right.
But I don't
Someone
say
should
it.
tell
It's
them.
like,
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
just
What is wrong with you
Can you
people?
go?
Tell
Can you go
them
tell her she
I
did a
think-
good job? Don't tell her I said it though.
Yeah,
Just
no,
tell her
just
she
kinda
did a good
casually
job.
bring it up.
Yeah, it's simple and it sounds
Yes.
ridiculous and it can feel awkward, especially if you don't know the person well or
Yeah.
you're
Right.
socially uncomfortable, especially with new people.
Yeah.
But man, nobody will ever be mad about you saying something nice to them. They might be awkward if they're like me and they don't really know how to take a compliment. They're just
Yeah,
like,
they'll put it on
Thank
someone
you.
else.
Thank you.
But
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
never
good.
going to do bad.
No,
So
preach.
this was good. This was
Yeah,
fun.
That's awesome.
This is great.
I want you both to come back to the table sometime soon.
Done.
And
Made it.
thank those of you for watching. What's a good action verb for the subscribe button?
Crush it.
Crush
Crush
the
it.
subscribe button like
Crush it.
this. And if you enjoy it,
Tender-hearted.
if it was helpful for you, share it with your friends.
Yes.
And we will see you next week backstage.